such an honor to hear him speak in person, and thank you also for keeping your promises over so many years, Mr. Schwarzenegger. It's incredible for me, I must say, but I also understand the people who are out there and they're frightened. There's so much going on. There's the Russian aggression, there's the inflation, there's pollution, our planet Earth getting hotter and hotter, social media hate, and so on. So I totally get it that people are frightened, but that's what makes the Austrian World Summit so nice and so great, that we are here together, we listen to each other, we listen to new ideas, and it just gives inspiration and hope and new thinking. And I found a movie quote, which I want to stress now. Okay. It's that moment. The future has not been written, there is no fate but what we make for ourselves. You might know that one.
Quoting Terminator 2 in front of the governor. I love it,
Well,
Sylvia. You're an American now.
Oh, yeah. Definitely, it makes me an American now.
Well, the thing I love, too, when you talk about that anxiety, we heard Monica say something beautiful earlier, and that is to remain optimistic, to focus on solutions. And that's what the Austrian World Summit is all about, to find ways we can change the earth, to lead to justice for all, to lead to more sustainability, to really focus on peace, not war. But one of the interesting things we're finally starting to see, Sylvia, is we're seeing militaries and national security communities around the globe finally acknowledge that climate change is a threat to global stability, that they realize climate change can impact missions, not just in times of peace, but also in times of war.
And that's exactly what our colleague Hannelore is talking now about with her powerful panel. Hannelore, bitte.
Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you, Matt. Thrilled to be here with you today, and I'm happy to host our first panel of the day, which couldn't be more up to date: climate change and security. Preparing for this panel, I realized, and I was surprised actually, to see how many political players, experts, and international organizations have recognized that there is a connection between climate change and security. Let me start with a few quotes. The European Parliament 2022. In short, climate change as a risk to global security is here to stay. On the other side of the Atlantic, the US National Intelligence Council 2021. There is a growing risk of conflict over water and migration, particularly after 2030. The FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations 2022. Climate change threatens human rights, it increases hunger, poverty, and inequality, and it makes people vulnerable. I will discuss all this with experts, and please welcome on the screen the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Pekka Haavisto, who's joining us from Helsinki. Vladimir Klitschko, founder of We Are All Ukrainians, he's joining us from Kyiv. And may I ask on stage General Tom Middendorp, the former Chief of Defense of the Netherlands, and the one and only Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Please join me. Thank you. Hello. Thank you for being here. I'd like to start with Minister Haavisto in Finland. Yes, we can see him behind us. You have a long border with Russia. Russian aggression and the attacks on Ukraine have completely changed your security policy. As we all know, you're now a member of NATO. But long before, Finland has been advocating a climate-smart policy, saying actions to combat the climate crisis need to be incorporated into public policy, into all aspects of public policy, into foreign policy, into security policy. Now, as a NATO member, now facing the situation you are facing, is this still as valid? Is climate still as important?
Well, first of all, it's lovely to be online with you, and thanks, Arnold, for your very strong words. You are listened very carefully also here in Finland. The message is very clear. Thank you for that. And of course, from our side, the climate policy, environmental policy has been one of the key issues during this government. And unfortunately, at the same time, we have been seeing a Russian aggression against Ukraine. And we have to admit that this Russian aggression is not only influencing the military side of the things or the humanitarian side of the things, but also on the environmental issues. We should actually make the destroyment of the environment during the war as a crime. It's an ecocide, and we should react to that as well. Finland particularly is supporting now Ukraine on the environmental issues, environmental project, and also for the nuclear safety. We have all seen the news from Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and so forth. But to answer your question, yes, climate policy will remain as a key issue for Finland. We have committed to be a climate neutral 2035, and we are working towards that goal.
Dr. Vladimir Klitschko, thank you for joining us from Kiev. Your country is under attack. We have all heard this morning, again, attacks this morning. The Russian aggression, of course, causes first and foremost suffering for the people, tremendous tragedies, but there are also huge environmental effects. Contaminated water, destroyed soils, just to name a few of them. We have just heard how security policy and climate change are linked. You're joining us at this moment. You're joining an environmental conference. I'd like to get your ideas and your thoughts on that. Where do you see the connection between climate and security?
Good day, everyone. Kristi, dear Arnold. It's an honor to be part of this conference, and you've been supporting, you, dear Arnold, been supporting for many years climate change on our planet. Now, in Kyiv, Ukraine, speaking of contaminated water, as a matter of fact, just 5 hours ago, we had one of the largest on scale and intensive rocket attack on the city of Kyiv, on the capital. And as a matter of fact, just 100 meters from where I live, a rocket landed in the water. You know that we in Ukraine, it's not just the largest European country, Ukraine is, and having the most rich soil that are unfortunately getting contaminated with all the weaponry and left ammunition and continue to be poisoned. And not to forget that also, as our colleague from Finland just said, that obviously this war is also putting in danger Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Ukraine. And Zaporizhzhia, so you understand, it's more than Fukushima and Chernobyl putting together. And over the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, rockets been flying, the roof has been on fire, and it's still in the hostage of the Russian military forces. We don't know what else and what other terroristic attack Russia is going to do in Ukraine, but we definitely must stay united, must stay together against this evil, senseless war that taking lives of us Ukrainians, taking lives of the future generation with contaminating our planet. And as I said, in Ukraine, we have one of the most important sources for people that living in Africa and Asia, and we're supplying with our grains, because as I said, our agricultural side is extremely important for the world. And we probably go into here and be affected, and those countries in Africa and Asia are going to be affected because we couldn't leave. We couldn't let our grains delivered to those people who are in hunger, suffering. And not to forget as well that Ukraine is part of the chain, of the global chain system of food supply. So it is extremely important to be part of this conference and understand that war is actually, it's all about life and death, not just in the long term as with the climate change, but also on the short term. It really, our time is ticking in hours, and life and death means for us in this senseless war, literally living or dying. And we cannot plan too far away. We can plan for hours, plan for days, weeks maybe, but not more than that. And obviously, as I said one more time, and I repeat it, we must stay together. We, the free world, must stay together against this evil, senseless war.
Vladimir Klitschko, I cannot tell you. I cannot tell you how much we appreciate that in a situation you are in, you're joining us here today at this conference. Governor Schwarzenegger, what do you think about all that? Your thoughts on the situation we're in?
Well, first I want to say thank you to Vladimir for being with us today. I mean, I have to say that we totally feel for you, of what you go through. And both of the Klitschko brothers have been always great supporters of mine and were always 100% behind me, whatever I did, and the same is the other way around. I'm 100% always behind what you guys do because you're great champions, and not only were you great champions in sports, but you're great champions then when you went out into other fields. You in politics, your brother in business, and in an author and writing great books, doing motivational speeches and all that. So it's really fantastic the kind of life that you have led. And I'm a I'm totally inspired by both of you. So thank you very much for being part of this conference. And again, let's give them a big hand. Let's give Vladimir a big hand. Thank you.
You're the icon we were looking up to and still looking up to, Arnold.
Exactly.
You're the icon.
Thank you.
And for many, many, many billions of people in this world, keep on lifting, as we say, keep on punching, but keep on lifting.
We will. Thank you. Also, big thank you also to Becker Harvisto and to General Mittendorf. Both of them are really terrific that they bring a whole new kind of a lens to this discussion of the environment. And I've learned something from my mentor, George Shultz, Secretary George Shultz, who was the Secretary of State under Ronald Reagan, President Reagan. And he said that we have to look at the environment as a four-legged stool, meaning that it's not just about pollution, but what happens when the world gets polluted. We have to look at it through the lens of pollution. We have to look at it through the lens of health. We have to look at it through the lens of national security. We have to look at it through the lens of opportunities, financial and business opportunities. So there's all of those different lenses that we have to look through. And he's so right with that. And I think that's what you're going to talk about here today. Because most people don't even think about that national security has something to do with the environment. But it has a lot to do with the environment. And I think that it has to do with energy. And we see this right now, how much Europe is dependent on Russian oil and on gas. And it makes you, basically, as I said last year in my speech, finance the war against the Ukraine. So it's all kind of linked together. Not even talking now about, and I think that Vladimir can talk more eloquently about the disaster that it creates, this war creates in the Ukraine when it comes to their soil, with all the mines that are being distributed all over, and the water that is getting polluted, and the soil that is getting polluted, and all that stuff. So it is all linked together. But I'm not an expert in this subject, so I like to just hand it over to the experts. One thing I remember for sure, and that is that President Eisenhower, there's certain things that presidents say that you admire that kind of stays with you. One of the things President Eisenhower said, that America has to be 80% self-reliant when it comes to energy. 20% we can get from other countries. But if we get more, then we're vulnerable. And I think that's the case with every country. It doesn't really matter what country we're talking about. You have to have your own energy. And if you don't have it, then there's other ways to create that energy. Because renewable energy, any country can create. And of course, I'm one of those people, and I know a lot of you are against that. I'm one of those people that says, yeah, yes, with nuclear power. Because it is producing clean energy. And that's what we are talking about here. I know that people say it's very dangerous and it can blow up and it can cause accidents. Yes, it can. But let's not forget that only 4,000 some accidents, lives have been lost because of accidents. But in the meantime, with fossil fuels, 7 million people die every year because of fossil fuels. So what are we talking about here? So I mean, I know it's a controversial thing to say, and I know Monica, my partner, right now has her hair standing up and saying, damn it, why is he talking about that and all that stuff? You know, so I totally understand that, but I mean, so there are different opinions about that. It just happens to be mine. I'm with Bill Gates. Bill Gates is right now building a big, nice nuclear plant in America. And because the technology is different, then there's new technology available that's safer. And I think it's something to do because it's not perfect. But like I said, with the emergencies, when there's an emergency, who looks for perfect? It's an emergency. You know, saying there was a guy on a plane when I flew back from Australia that passed out. He had a heart attack or something happened, or he choked. I don't know what it was, but there was a doctor on the plane and he took a pen out and he stuck a pen right into his throat so he could breathe. It was the best thing the guy could do for this emergency, and the guy stayed alive. There was no one asking, does he have it cleaned, the pen first? Is it a clean needle or this or that? No, it was an emergency. And so when there's an emergency, we have to do certain things. You know, and just to move on with the agenda. Anyway, I leave it now to the experts to talk about the rest of it.
Let me just add one thing here. I think people love you so much because you always speak your mind, and you know what you're saying and you mean what you're saying. General Middendorp, you are known as the climate general. You have written a book with exactly that title on this topic, security and climate change. As the chief of defense of the Netherlands, how have you become concerned about the security aspects of climate change? Can you give us an example? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. But to come back at President Eisenhower, I think he also admitted that he found it very hard to balance the urgent with the important. And conflicts are the urgent matters at hand, and they suck up all our attention, rightfully so, but often at the cost of the important. And climate change is the important. The important is about preventing tomorrow's wars from happening. And climate change is a root cause of conflict in the future. And that's what I'm going to talk about. And when I first addressed this, about 7 years ago, when I'm still in office, hell broke loose in the Netherlands. Screaming headlines, Chief of Defense predicts climate wars, climate activists accusing me of hijacking their topic, securitizing it. I went viral on the social media, big parliamentary debate, but in a week it became quiet, and it only made me more committed to dedicate my time, also after retirement, to this effort. And it gave me a nickname similar to the nickname of Arnold, who was the Green Governor. It gave me the nickname the Green General. So we are partners in crime, I guess. And why am I so committed? Because I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the legacy we leave behind. I'm concerned about the legacy we leave to our children, to my children. So I do this for them. And I've been involved in 20 different conflict areas. And I've seen how climate change really brings new geopolitical competition to the whole planet. I've seen how climate change is a risk multiplier in many of the countries around the world, especially the fragile countries. I've seen how it drives people out of their homelands, how it turns people into extremists, into pirates, how it brings migration flows, and how it creates internal conflicts. And let me give you one example. In Afghanistan, when I was a commander there, we have been fighting for days to free a village of the Taliban. And in the end, we succeeded after harsh fighting, but only to find out that the tensions remained in that village. And the Taliban could return any moment. And it took us a while to find out why these tensions were there. And then we discovered it's all about water. It's all about water scarcity. These are all farmers, they need water, they couldn't agree on how to distribute that. So we negotiated a solution. And after that, it became quiet. It became peaceful in that village. The Taliban could not return. And I learned an important lesson here. And the important lesson is that we need to do more than fight the symptoms, which is what we do when we fight conflicts. But we need to fight the root causes of that conflict. And often those root causes are related to climate change. I've seen climate change being used in Iraq, where IS occupied the Mosul Dam and used water as a weapon, as an instrument of power over the local population. So it made me very convinced climate change is a matter of national security and that the security sector needs to be part of the deal. We are not here to save the planet, we are here to save ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Green Governor, Green General, I don't know, Minister Haavisto, if you've been called the Green Minister, but maybe. We've been talking about climate and security concerns. Climate change increases the incidences of extreme weather. It increases it causes problems for food production, availability of clean water. As you have just said, it leads to more competition for natural resources. How has Finland been able, or how is Finland implementing all this into a modern foreign policy, especially now as a member of NATO?
Of course, the climate issue is very important for us also for our own reason, because we are an Arctic country. And we know that Arctic snow and ice is melting. Its influences to our environment. It also influences the indigenous people living in the Arctic areas. But I fully agree what General said. I have been working in Afghanistan, working in Sudan for the UN. And people in Finland or in Europe maybe think that poor people don't think about the environment. But it's exactly so that the poorest people of the world are totally depending on what's happening to the environment, what's happening to the water. And the climate issue is to the utmost the security issue, like it has been said. If we don't do enough for the environment, if we let the climate consequences to influence in Africa, in Latin America, so forth, we will have a huge migration wave also towards Europe and so forth. So we are speaking about the key issues of the security. And I think this is what we should do in the Europe. We should look world also with the environmental eyes, with the climate eyes, what can we do more? And I think Europe has already gone towards the green transition, but we can do more. And we really have to keep the speed on these issues.
Thank you, Minister Haavisto. I'd like to bring in Vladimir Klitschko again. Ukraine is in a special situation. Food security, of course, is one of the topics. You have alluded to that before. Ukraine is one of the major producers of grain in this world. I'm interested in your opinion. Can you elaborate about your situation?
Absolutely. It is important, I believe, education of people. We talk about poor and we look at Russia and why Russia is so evil, and it's just not Putin who has unleashed that full-scale war against Ukraine, against humanity. It's lack also of education of people in Russia that are with weapons, going to the other country, killing, destroying. They don't think about environment. They don't care about environment. And I'm telling you the truth, because they have a lack of education, a lack of understanding. They are part of the chain, of the system, of the ecosystem, of the entire world. And this nuclear power plant, Zaporizhia, holding as a hostage. And at some point, if you're holding the hostage, and as we know in the past, whenever hostage was held by the criminals, it could fail, it could be dead. And this danger is not to underestimate. And I believe that the key is populism must be stopped. More of education must be launched. And as we see it in Russia, a full dictatorship that is taking place for many decades after Soviet Union broke apart, made out of those people just wild men, zombies that are following without understanding to destroy life. And this is against humanity. And that's why it is extremely important to educate people, to have not just one source of media, like state-sponsored media, as it is in Russia and other countries that are in dictatorship, that makes you blind. If you don't understand the environment, you don't understand life, you don't care about life. You're giving it up just like that. That's how Russians do. But as I said, I'm supporting the initiative to take Ukraine to NATO, to let Russians understand that launching this war was a mistake. And as long as these Russians that supporting Putin's regime don't understand it because of lack of knowledge, the war will continue, even though we're going to get into the borders of our country. And with counteroffensive, as we heard about counteroffensive so much, but the war probably not going to be stopped. So Russians must understand in Russia that this war was a gigantic mistake, and not going with the development of the evolution, but slowing it down to some imperialistic ambitions that are from the past. I can't really understand how people can think this way in 2023. Speaking about more land, but what kind of land? You're poisoning that land. You're poisoning the environment. You're poisoning people's minds. You're just a poison. You must be gone. Thank you one more time for putting me on stage. It's such pleasure. I love you all, guys. I love you, Arnold. Thank you so much. And let's keep on punching, let's keep on pumping, and let's finish this war together to protect the future generations.
Thank you so much again. Vladimir Klitschko, you talked about educating people. We have the power is the theme of the conference this year. In what way can the security sector influence people, influence policymakers to actually get to solutions, to find solutions?
Well, there are two important words in that sentence, power and we. If you put a lot of power weights together in one room, it doesn't bring more power, but it starts making power if they start working as a team. So it needs a team effort. And we are now realizing that climate change is a much wider problem than just an environmental problem. It's also an economic problem, and it's also a security problem. So you need many players at the table, including the security sector. They can be part of that power, they need to be part of that power, and they can do a lot. I can give you a long list, I won't do that, but they can work on climate intelligence, to see it coming, to see the next conflicts coming, the impacts of climate change coming, so that we can adapt and prevent. They can also work on the mitigation side, reducing pollution. The military is often the biggest polluter in any country, so they have a responsibility to take. But they also were always a front runner on technologies, on new innovations, the GPS, internet, it all came from the military arena. So why not become also a front runner on new green technologies? And it can bring the military a lot of benefit. Let me give you one example on water. I ran into an innovator who said, I can produce water out of desert air. And it was too fantastic to be true. So I want to congratulate him and move on. But then I thought, okay, what if this works? And he wanted to do that with very limited energy. And I gave an opportunity. I said, okay, next week I'll fly you to the desert in Mali. We have a base there. You can test your device and see how it works. And he did. And he was able to produce 1 glass of water in 1 day. Not a lot. But we kept on supporting him from defense, and he further developed this into a device able to produce 20, 30 liters of water per day with a solar panel. Very limited energy. And this is the difficult part. And he, last year in the World Expo in Dubai, He was in the Dutch pavilion, and he arranged the whole water supply for a big vegetation in that building, and he produced 1,000 liters of water per day in a small container. Now just imagine the impact of that. The military impact is that we don't need to bring water to mission areas. We are now transporting millions of bottles of water to our soldiers all over the world. Millions of bottles. We don't need to do that anymore with a device like this. But if you put a device like this in a village in the Sahel region, that village can sustain itself on water. They don't need to move away, they can stay where they are. So we can prevent a lot of harm from happening through innovations, and I think the military can be a platform for those innovations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very powerful words from all of our speakers on this panel. I'd like to give the last word to you to close this panel, ask you for your final thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I see my American ambassador sitting here to Austria, Vicky Kennedy. Vicky, you want to get up quickly just to give her a big hand here. Thank you so much for coming here. We appreciate it very much. But anyway, the bottom line is that I just feel that it is extremely important that we talk about pollution. Because so many times we talk about climate change, and it's kind of not as much as an emergency when people hear climate change as when they hear pollution and how many people go to the hospital with cancer, how many people die every year because of pollution. And so to me, and the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I have the experience coming from the communication and marketing background in business. It's all about how you communicate and how you draw people in to buy your product. When I was in California, when I became governor, they always talked, like I said earlier, about climate change. And when we did polls, people didn't quite know what we were talking about. What does that mean? It's down the line. People's mind is not really kind of developed to deal with something that is down the line. It's all about now. And so we changed that dialogue, and we started talking more about pollution and about the health impact it has on children, for instance, in the Central Valley in California, where kids with the age of 3 or 4 already have asthma. So we started playing commercials from the Lung Association in America about the asthma that it creates from pollution. And then people started freaking out. And all of a sudden, people started, when you did the polls, they said, this is our priority. It went from like being number 7 priority to number 1 priority. So it was all about communicating. When people saw that, that's what changed everything, and that enabled us to then pass all of those very tough environmental laws because the people went along with us. And the people voted for it. When we put it as an initiative out there, they voted for it. They supported the legislators that voted for it. They supported me when I signed the bills. So it was like really, the people bought in, and that's why we were able to move in a short period of time so quickly the agenda forward. Whereas other states are not able to do that, and other countries are not able to do that. But they are still talking about climate change. And I don't know why people are so in love. I don't say that you shouldn't talk about climate change, but I think it's very important always that we add on and say what kills us is really pollution. The people are choking to death because of poison in the air, and this is what we have to eliminate. And the only way we eliminate this is to get off fossil fuels. We got to go and terminate fossil fuels, but we can only do that if we are allowing green projects to be built. So that's the key thing. That's why I said we got to get rid of this fear of holding back green projects, because there are an endless amount of projects in Europe and also in the United States that are ready to be built, but we don't because they're held up with lawsuits and kind of protests and all this kind of stuff that's going on. So I think it's the key thing that we recognize. We got to get rid of pollution, which comes from fossil fuels, and the only way we can get rid of that is if we have a replacement, which is renewable energy. And that's why we need to let the renewable energy projects, the windmills and the solar things be built all over the world, and geothermal, whatever those kind of sources are. Yeah, so that's, anyway. So that's
Note to politicians, speed up. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us here today. Special thanks to Vladimir Klitschko and Pekka Haavisto for joining us online. Thank you, gentlemen. Great panel, great discussion. And thank you for being here in Vienna this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.